Welcome back, fellow Argent Saga Knights, to another episode of Argos Anonymous. My name is Adam. I like to bring dedicated Argent Saga content to you as often as I can. So if that's something you'd be interested in, smash those like and subscribe buttons, and we'll keep you updated with all the new stuff that's happening and old stuff that's happening and marketplace updates and cool cards and just random schmutz and whatever we come up with. Today, though, we're going to continue our How to Play Argent Saga series with part number 2. During this video, we're going to talk about the 3 basic card types that you'll find in your main deck, which is going to be units, spells, and augments. And then we'll just kind of put it all together with some basic rounds of play. During this, we'll talk about the unit zones and how they kind of work, and how to attack, and how to move through the phases of play, and how the towers work, and all that kind of stuff. If you have any questions at the end of this, feel free to ask. I'm not perfect too, so if you're an amazing player and I mess something up, just bark at me in the comments and I'll be like, I'm sorry, you're amazing. And then we'll have some fun with that too, no problem. Stay tuned for future videos because we'll continue this How to Play series with another video talking about more detail of deck construction, deck building, and how that works. And then some gameplay mechanics like the unit mechanics, quickness and destroyer, all that kind of stuff. And then after that, we'll do some actual full gameplay footage, and we'll just talk about it every step of the way, and then answer more questions you have, and let's have some fun. Let's get started. Okay, so for this next section of How to Play Argent Saga, we're going to talk about before you start. The last section was all about the setup and everything required to play. This section is before you actually start playing. There's a few steps that you need to perform in order to play properly. The first thing you're going to want to do is you have to make sure that you've revealed your towers to your opponent. So you go ahead and you show them what towers you have just so they kind of know what they're getting themselves into. But then you're going to shuffle them up and place them face down on the table. And now I know there's only 5 towers. And so if you're a little bit of a sneaky guy or gal, you might intentionally try to remember what tower is what. But the idea here is to not do that. The idea is that neither you nor your opponent know what tower is where. And that's part of the strategy. And given the rest of the game design, actually, it's one of the few one of the maybe 2 randomized components of the game, which is good because they've actually removed a lot of randomness out of this game just based on how the mulligans work, which we'll talk about next, and because you get a guaranteed resource every single turn. So the tower randomness is one of the few random components remaining, which I think is good. It's good to have some randomness in there. The next thing you're going to want to do is you want to shuffle your shard deck and you shuffle your main deck if you haven't already done it. So we'll just go ahead and skip that part. I'll shuffle it and then we'll cut back. All right, I have now mysteriously, magically, instantly shuffled my main deck and my shard deck. So the next thing you want to know is who's going to start playing first. Theoretically, you're playing against another person. If you're playing with yourself, then your curtains are closed. It doesn't really matter who goes first. You just get to pick. But normally what you do is you just roll a dice or you flip a coin. So, I'll roll this dice here. I got a 2. My opponent rolls a dice and this counts as a 6. So my opponent will get to go first. Fine. And then usually what you do is whoever wins, the other person gets to pick on the second game. So whoever loses gets to choose whether or not they want to go first or second on the second game. The next thing you do is after you've picked who goes first, you're going to draw. Each player draws 5 cards. In Argent Saga, you start the game with 5 cards from your main deck, and the maximum hand size is 7. So at the beginning of your turn, typically on a typical turn, you're going to draw a card, and at the end of your turns in Argent Saga, you have to discard cards until you're down to 7 cards at the most. But at the beginning of the game, you're drawing 5 cards from your main deck, and it looks like we have a variety of things here. Here's a 1 cost. What you want to see is what they call cards on, wow, that's perfect. Cards on curve, meaning you can play some lower cost things and then you can play some higher cost things. Maybe you have a combo deck and you're looking for specific cards. In Argent Saga, each player has 1 free mulligan per se, where what you get to do is you get to take whatever cards you don't want from your hand. So if you have your first intro hand here, each player gets to pick a couple of cards that they don't want, and you just put it on the bottom of your deck. And then you draw more cards equal to the number of cards you just dumped. So I just dumped 2 cards, I draw 2 more cards, and then that's it. You get to do it 1 time. Each person gets to do it. And then when you're done, you indicate to your opponent, okay, I'm ready. Boom. So there you go. That's the before you start. And let's move on to playing the game. All right, so before we get too deep into this, let's take just a moment to talk about the three different types of cards that you're going to be playing with. Now, I'm not talking about shards, and I'm not talking about towers, and I'm not talking about champions and spirits. Yes, those are different types of cards. We're talking about the ones in your main deck. So the first type of card you're going to have in your main deck is units, and how these are going to work. When you have a unit, you would play the unit, and it goes into play, and once it goes into play, it stays there until it's destroyed or sacrificed in some way. So units are pretty darn straightforward. That's it. The next type of thing you're going to have in your deck is you're going to have spells. Spells, now these are all labeled, right? Like a unit is going to say unit on the card. There it is. Unit, what type is it? It's a dragon. So a spell is going to say spell on the card. There's two types of spells currently in the game. The first type is just a regular spell, right? It just says spell. There's nothing special about it. It says there's the cost up there in the corner. It does not have a lightning bolt. It does not say instacast. So this kind of spell you can only play during the main phase on your turn outside of combat, right? Think of it as a slow moving spell. It takes time to get your focus together and get your resources, and then you cast it, and you can't have any distractions, right? That's this kind of spell. Once you cast a spell, its ability resolves if it can, right? Or if it doesn't, whatever happens, after you cast it, it doesn't stay on the field. It goes over to your discard. Fine. The other type of spell that you have in the game is called an instacast spell. It still says spell here, but you'll see the ability instacast on the card text down here at the bottom, and you'll see a lightning bolt up in the upper left corner. An instacast spell, just like it sounds, can be cast instantly, which means you can cast it during your turn. At the same time you could cast these spells, you can cast it during your main phase, or you can cast it in the middle of combat. You can cast it in response to something your opponent's casting. You can even cast it during your opponent's turn. You can cast these anytime you have priority, which we'll talk about later. Just think of it as you can basically cast these almost anytime you want. So there's your two different types of spells. And we talked about units. Now let's talk about the third card type in your main deck, augments. So there's a couple different types of augments. The most common kinds, at least so far, I'm sure there'll be more later. The way an augment works is you play it, and similar to a unit, it's going to stick on the field. If you have an augment that is a gear, you play it on a unit, right? It's like equipment. You're equipping this unit, you're augmenting the unit with this gear. So it says right on the gear, it'll say equipped to target unit. So as soon as you play this, it goes on the target unit. That's the augment that is a gear. If the unit is destroyed, once the unit is destroyed, the gear also goes to the discard because it can't exist not equipped to a unit. It has to be on a unit. So you have augments that are gear. The next thing you have is you have augments that are not gear, but they have to be equipped to a unit. And if that's the case, it'll say it on there. This is a delayed poison, right? So it's going to be an augment that at the start of your next turn, destroy equipped unit. You would want to equip this not to your units, right? You'd equip it to your opponent's unit. So it's an augment that'll stay on the field. It says equipped to target unit. You'd play it on your opponent's unit, and then you'd enjoy watching it die on the next turn. Another type of augment is an augment that just sits on your field, right? And it has an effect. So just like a unit, you'll play this augment and it'll stay in play until it's destroyed or sacrificed or something like that. And this augment has an exhaust ability, similar to like an artifact or something like that in some other games. It'll basically sit on the field and you can exhaust it, which means you tap it sideways and you have an effect. Hidden Laboratory. The exhaust effect is you can sacrifice a golem unit to draw a card. But different augments will have all kinds of different abilities, and I just wanted to take a moment to go over those. So in your main deck, yeah, you've got units, you've got instant spells and regular speed spells, and then you have these different types of augments, and that's gonna help you construct your decks and play going forward. Playing Argent Saga comes down to 3 different phases. There are 3 phases of the game, which keeps it pretty straightforward, pretty simple, I think. The first phase is the draw phase. So at the very start of your turn, you're going to draw 1 card. Now, there's one exception to this. If it's the very first turn of the whole game. So if you're the turn player who plays first, if you won the dice roll and you said, I want to play first, you skip your draw phase, right? Because otherwise it would just be too good. Now, the person who plays second still gets to draw. So that's the advantage of not starting the game playing first, right? You get an extra card basically, but you lose the advantage of going first. So we will assume that I am, let's say I'm not, this isn't my very first turn, just to demonstrate this. So I'm going to start my turn by drawing a card. Okay, there it is. Hey, what do you know? And then the next thing is the charge phase. During the charge phase, you're going to ready units that are exhausted. We'll get into that later. And you're going to draw one shard from the top of your shard deck and put it in your shard zone, okay? Shards produce shard light. Oh, nice foil shard here. Actually, he's kind of scuffed up. That's fine. So shards are your resources in Argent Saga. They're kind of like, if you've ever played Magic, they're like lands. And you're going to use them to cast all of your spells and units and augments and gear, equipment, stuff like that. So that's your charge phase. So we've done our draw phase, we've done our charge phase, and now it's the main phase. And that's it. Those are your three phases. Draw, charge, main. Draw, charge, main. Commence the game. During your main phase, you're going to play spells and play units, and you're going to move in and out of combat. It's just one giant main phase. And what you'll find is that in Argent Saga, your main phase is where almost everything happens, right? So here in our main phase, I'm going to look at the cards in my hand, and I'm going to look at my resources. And it looks like I have one shard, so I can cast anything that costs one or less, obviously. And looking in here, here's the cost of the cards is up in the top left corner. Everything is higher than one except for this. So this looks like, let's see, it's a spell. Spells, how they work is a spell is a card that you play, and then once its effect resolves, it goes to your discard zone. It doesn't stay in the game. Whereas if you have a unit is a card that you play, and once you play a unit, it goes into a unit zone, and it stays unless otherwise stated on the card. One thing to keep in mind is when you play this game, you just, as much as you can, you just follow what the card says. Most of the time, however you can most literally interpret the card text, most of the time is how it happens. So just read it, and then whatever the most literal, like borderline autistic version of the card you can come up with happening, that's how it's supposed to happen. So there's another type of card called an augment, which we don't have any in my hand, so we'll talk about it later. Anyway, if I'm playing first or second, I mean, this is what? This is a spell that is an instacast. An instacast spell you can cast at any time, including during your opponent's turn, and it's marked by a lightning bolt. Any spell that does not have a lightning bolt, you can only cast during your turn on your main phase, and out of combat, right? So just during the slowest part of your main phase, like let's see, we have an example here. Looks like all of my spells are actually instacast. They all have lightning bolts, meaning you can cast them at any time during your opponent's turn, during your mom's turn, during, Passover, whenever you want to. You can cast these spells as long as you have the shards required to cast them. So this spell gives target fire unit plus 2,000. I don't have any units, so I'm just going to pass my turn and be done. Boom, boom. Let's just say my opponent just took his turn. Good for him. All right, so I'm going to start my next turn. So what do? Well, first, I'm going to draw a card and add it to my hand. Hey, I've got a nice low-cost unit. Maybe I can cast him. Great. Now it's my charge phase, so I'm going to draw one more shard from the top of my shard deck. I'm going to put it down here. Now I have 2 shards available to play cards. So, it'd be cool to get a unit on the table. What do I have here? So it looks like I have 2 units that I could cast. One of them is a 1 cost and one of them is a 2 cost. The 1 cost is a juvenile dragon. He says, while you control 2 or more other dragon units, this card has quickness. That's kind of cool. Quickness is an ability where as soon as you play the card, it can do all of its stuff in the first turn, because the way units normally go in Argent Saga is when you play a unit, it has like a summoning sickness, right? So it can't use it can't use abilities that require it to exhaust itself. Exhausting is when something is turned sideways to denote that it has already performed an exhausting action, right? Or maybe it's already attacked that turn, and attacking sounds exhausting, right? So you're going to exhaust everything. Notice here's an exhaust ability on this shard. When you want to use the shard's ability to produce 1 shard light, you're going to exhaust it. So what quickness does in a unit, quickness means the turn you play it, it can attack and it can exhaust itself in other ways the turn it comes into play, which is in Argent Saga a really powerful ability, which you'll come to understand once you play. So what does this one do? Unfortunately, both of these dragon cards play off of other dragons being in play, so we're gonna just have to kind of skip their abilities and play something. This one, when it arrives, another target dragon gets plus 1,000 this turn. So an arrive ability is something that as soon as you play the unit, once it hits the field, this arrive ability triggers and happens, right? And we'll talk about more about that later. But for now, let's play this guy. Now let's play our booster dragon. He's cool. So in order to play this card, here's what I'll do. I have to pay the cost. Before you can play the card, you have to pay the cost. And the cost here is two shard light, right? Or shard juice, or shard, whatever you want to say, 2 shards. So I'm going to exhaust 2 shards by tapping them sideways, right? Just like tapping, if you play Magic, I'm going to tap 2 shards. I'm going to exhaust 2 shards. And now that I've paid the cost, I can play the card. And so I select a unit zone, and I'm going to put my card in that zone. Remember, once he's in this zone, he can't just willy-nilly jump around the board. He's there. He's stuck there unless you have some card that allows him to move or says that he can move. He can't move otherwise. So we have our booster dragon. Now, he does not have quickness, so he can't do diddly squat this turn. He's just going to sit there. And now I'm all tapped out. I have no more resources, and I have nothing that costs 0 in my hand. So let's see, can I do anything else? There's nothing I really want to do. I'm just going to end my turn. So let's just say my opponent has now taken his turn, and he's as slow as I am, so nothing has happened yet. So now we're going to go to my turn now. Okay, so the beginning of my turn, I'm going to draw a card. Boop, boop. There we go. There's my new card. Got a new unit. Nice, and it costs 3. Maybe we can play him this turn. That'd be kind of fun. So I got a new unit, and then I go to my charge phase. That was my draw phase. Now we'll go to my charge phase. So during this charge phase, I've got something to ready. When you ready something, you're readying it back from exhaustion. So I'm going to take both of my exhausted shards and ready them back up during this charge phase. And then I'll draw a new shard from the top of my shard deck and place it down here in my little resource alcove, my shard zone. So now I'm on turn 3 and I have 3 shards available, which is kind of exciting. Also, I have a unit that is no longer in the first turn. It has to be, in order to do, the official text of the game is, in order for units to do something, they have to be in play from the beginning of the turn, right? So he has now been in play from the beginning of this turn, which means he can attack, which is very exciting. So having finished the draw and the charge phase, now we're in the main phase. So we can play cards, we can cast spells. Even if they don't have lightning bolts, we can cast spells during our main phase. And we could attack, we could move to combat. If you've played Magic the Gathering, which is obviously the game I came from, you'll hear me referencing it all the time. In Magic, you attack all at once with everything you have. But in Argent Saga, it's different. In Argent Saga, you attack with 1 unit at a time, which means during your main phase, you can move in and out of combat. It's almost like combat is a mini phase during your main phase. So let's just get right to it. Before I cast anything, I'm going to attack. I'm going to say, okay, so what do I say? Here's how it works in Argent Saga. When you want to attack, you announce to your opponent, I'm going to move to combat, or I'm going to attack, or whatever. And then they have a chance to do something before you move into combat. So I'm going to say, hey, Adam number 2 that nobody else can see across the field here, I'm going to move to combat. And then my opponent says, he's like eating a Snickers, he's not even paying attention. He's like, fine, whatever. And so then I will indicate the unit by exhausting it. So I'll exhaust my booster dragon because attacking is very exhausting. And then I will declare the target. Now, in Argent Saga, you are allowed to attack any unit that is exhausted. Because exhausting, think of it this way. When you go to attack something, you have to travel to attack. Like if you were to think of this in like a literal sense, you have to exhaust this unit and then he's traveling to attack and this unit becomes exposed. So like if you go out to attack something, your unit is exposed, it's like returning. And so then on your opponent's turn, they can attack your unit. So it's an additional risk of attacking is that it exposes your unit itself to attack, which is different than Magic and different than some other games. I personally think it's really fun. It's a fun extra element of skill that you have to consider in your gameplay. Anyway, so we're going to exhaust this unit. And in addition to being able to target exhausted unit, you can target towers, which is how you win the game. You have to destroy all the towers and then deliver one final hit on your opponent that deals damage, and that's how you win. So we're gonna go ahead and attack a tower, and let's just say that let's say we hit it. Now, for the purposes of understanding how to play, we're just going to assume that these are my opponent's towers, okay? So my booster dragon, in order to break a tower, in order to destroy a tower, I have to do two things. Number one, I have to reach the tower. And that involves whether or not my opponent has any guardians or whether or not my opponent casts a spell that kills it before it gets there, that he has a chance to do that, right? But let's just, for the sake of simplicity, let's just say I attack with my booster dragon and he reaches my opponent's tower. So the second thing he has to do to break a tower is the power. This is the power of the card. The power of my booster dragon is 1500, right? He's a fire card. He's got a cost of 2 and he has a power of 1500. So this 1500 booster dragon, let's say he just hit this tower. Once he hits the tower, we reveal the tower and we look at what the power or what the defense of the tower is. In this case, it's my Tower of Darkness, which has a defense of 1500. My booster dragon has a power of 1500. This tower is destroyed. Once a tower is destroyed, you invert it so that it faces your opponent to denote that the tower is dead. A destroyed tower can no longer be interacted with in any way. Once a tower is destroyed, it's basically considered out of play unless you have a card that can restore a destroyed tower. We'll get to that some later time. Every time you destroy a tower, the tower will have an effect that is like a balancing effect. Another really cool part of Argent Saga is that the game balances itself right out of the gate. So if your opponent is like steamrolling you by destroying your towers have powerful effects that will hit your opponent back, which helps balance the early game and helps you feel like you play every single game. And this is one of the reasons I love Argent Saga. You don't get land screwed, you get all the resources you need to play, and you never get completely steamrolled, you never get completely wiped out of the game. Even a brand new player is going to get some good hits in because the towers will balance the game. This Tower of Darkness, for example, says, when this card is destroyed, let's see if I can get it in the light here so y'alls can see it too. There we go. When this card is destroyed, you look at your opponent's hand and you select one card. Then your opponent discards that card. So when this card is destroyed, I get to look at my opponent's hand and I get to see his hand and see all of his little tricks and whatever. And then I get to pick a card and dump it into the discard zone, which is a pretty good ability. That's a pretty powerful thing. I can see all the things that are coming at me. Anyway, so let's say we're done with that attack phase. So I've just gone and attacked him. We're going to pretend these are my opponent's towers. Fine. Now we're out of the attack phase. We're back in the main phase. So now we can cast more units. We could cast some spells. I don't know. What should we do? Let's see. Juvenile Dragon. If we control 2 or more other dragon units, he gets quickness. Well, we only have 1, so that might not be the best. Hey, look at this guy. Rao Dragon Tamer is a 1500 power fire unit. See that red symbol up there? Costs 3 to play. It's a unit. It has an arrive ability. This card, when it enters the field zone, so when it hits the field, I get to switch target exhausted dragon unit to active. Wow. Well, what does that mean? Let me show you. Well, so first, how do we play this card? We have to pay the cost first, right? So to pay the cost, we have to exhaust 3 shards. I'm going to exhaust all 3 of my shards. And now I've paid the cost, and now I can play it. When I cast a spell, when I cast a unit, when I go to play a card, the opponent has a chance to respond to the cast. So I'll say, I'm going to play Rao Dragon Tamer. Boom, the opponent now has the chance to do something. And if you think about it, they might want to in this case because this card has an arrive ability that's going to ready this back up and then it can attack again. So the opponent might have a chance to like kill that dragon or something before this even hits the field. Fine. So I'm going to say, I'm going to cast this. I'm going to play this card. The opponent, I wait, right? Because I'm a respectful player. I give my opponent a chance to respond. My opponent, because he's still eating a couple Snickers bars, he's not even paying attention. He doesn't do anything. So I go, okay, cool. So then I pick a zone. Remember, you have to respect the unit zones. And I play this Dragon Tamer. And its arrive ability, boom. Now the arrive ability goes into the what's called the priority sequence, which we'll talk about later. My opponent now has a chance to respond to the arrive ability. People basically get a chance to respond to most things, but because he's still gorging himself on Snickers, he's not paying attention, and the arrive ability goes off, lets me switch target exhausted dragon unit to active. Boom, we just switched him back to active. He was exhausted, now he's active. Now what does this mean? Can the Rao Dragon Tamer do anything this turn? Can it attack? No, because it hasn't been in play since the beginning of this turn. Has the booster dragon been in play from the beginning of the turn? You bet. Yes, it has. And now it is no longer exhausted. So we are going to attack again because that's what we do. So now I'm in the main phase. I'm going to move to combat again. So how do I do that? I say, I'm going to move to combat. And my lazy Snickers gorging opponent says, that's fine, whatever. Now I will select my unit that I want to attack with, and I will exhaust that unit, and I will declare my target. My target can be either an exhausted unit or a tower. So I'm going to pick another tower, and let's say I pick this tower here. Once the unit makes contact with the tower, which because my opponent's lazy and doesn't want to do anything, let's just say that it does. We reveal the tower, and then we compare the power of the unit to the defense of the tower. The unit is 1500 power, the tower is 1500 defense, so it is destroyed. But the Tower of Water says, when this card is destroyed, you can draw 2 cards. Hey, so now my opponent, even though I'm kicking his butt, my opponent now gets a bonus, right? I blew up his tower, so he gets to draw 2 more cards, which makes him feel pretty good. He's like back in the game, right? And now what do we do? Well, let's see. I have one unit that hasn't been in play for the whole turn, so he can't do anything. And I've got another unit that's exhausted already, so he can't do anything else. All 3 of my shards are tapped out, and I have nothing that costs like 0, so I guess I'm done. I'll just pass turn to my opponent. Pass turn, hey buddy. He eats another Snickers and passes turn back to me, fine. So I'm going to start my turn again with the draw phase. So I'll draw 1 more card from the top of my main deck. It's a booster dragon. This could be fun. And then I'm going to go to my charge phase. So during my charge phase, I'm going to ready my unit back up and switch back to active. I'm going to ready my shards back up, put them back to active. And then, of course, don't forget to draw a shard from your shard deck and place it in your resource pool over here. Now, thus begins the main phase where all of the exciting things happen. So we're starting to get some big stuff now, right? We've got 4 shards available. We could do all kinds of stuff. So we have like this enraged dragon is pretty cool. It has like a nice arrive effect. We've got these booster dragons. Booster dragons make dragons stronger for a little bit, which could be helpful. What is this? Juvenile dragon. If we control another dragon unit, he gets quickness. Hey, so maybe can we do something here? I have an idea. I guess these aren't dragon units. What should we do? Should we deal 1,000 to target unit? Maybe we'll just do that. Maybe we'll just have fun that way. But you know what? Before we even play anything, I think we should just attack again. I think we should just go for it. Let's just go for the gold here. So in our main phase, let's keep all of our shards open and just move to combat. And I think we'll hit with the booster dragon again. So because I'm polite and I'm a good, efficient player, I'm going to announce that I'm moving to combat. Move to combat. My opponent is now he's passed out in like a sugar coma already from all the Snickers, so he doesn't even reply. So I'm just going to go ahead and exhaust my booster dragon and declare a target, and I'm going to declare this is my target, his tower over here. Once the booster dragon makes contact with the tower, you flip it over. It's the Tower of Light. So you read what the tower does. It says, because it has 1500 defense and this has 1500 power, it is destroyed. When I destroy this, I can put a unit into play. I get to play a knight token with Guardian. Oh, we get to talk about guardians now. Oh, buddy. So my opponent, because I just cracked his light tower, remember, we're just assuming these towers are my opponent's tower. We're going to invert it to denote that it is destroyed. And I'm going to wander across the room here and get a knight token. Just hang on one sec. So these knight tokens are great. They're great. Where are we going here? Okay, I should have a knight token in this deck. This is a constructed deck that I actually play with. So let's pull a knight token out of this. If I were a knight token, where would I be? Probably where this. Hey, here we go. So here's a knight token. So when you destroy a tower of light, you get to pop out one of these babies. It's a 2,000 power light unit. It has 0 cost because it's a token. It's a knight, it's a unit, and then the subtype, I guess, is knight, or the type is knight. And it's got an ability called Guardian. Guardian is how you block units. In this game, units can only block attacks if they have Guardian, which is cool, which means that it's easier to punch through. Unlike games where any unit can block and people can just turtle behind their enormous thing, Argent Saga keeps the game moving. Like it's not just the stalemate that sits forever, because most of your units can't even block attacks, right? So in order to block an attack, you have to have Guardian. And the way Guardian works is you can exhaust this card to make an attacking unit attack this card instead. So now that my opponent has a Guardian, we'll put him up here so that we can kind of still see him a little bit. Maybe we'll put him over here so even I can see him in the view screen. Now that he has a Guardian, if I attack him, he can intercept the attack. Now, of note, if you remember previously I said that when you play a unit, in order to use an exhaust ability or attack, it has to be in the game since the beginning of the turn. The one exception to that is Guardian. Guardian units, even the turn they come into play, they can still use Guardian. They can use it right away. So when this light tower is destroyed and this knight is generated, my opponent now has a blocker. And if I were to attack him with this Rao Dragon Tamer, he could block me with this Guardian, and because it has 2,000 power and my guy only has 1,500, he'll kill my unit. So I think we'll have to be kind of crafty here and try and figure this out. So let's see, do I have any way that I can be astute? Oh, I do. Let's be sneaky. Okay, let's try and trick my Snickers gorging opponent here. And what can we do? Here we go. Look at this. Target fire unit gets plus 2,000 this turn. If you look at spells, remember that spells that have a lightning bolt you can cast at any time. Insta-cast spells, you can cast it during your opponent's turn. You can cast it during before and after draw phases. You can cast it during combat. And spells that don't have a lightning bolt can only be cast during your turn out of combat during the main phase. Okay? So this spell has a lightning bolt, which means I could be sneaky. So I'm going to, let's go ahead and use it. Let's do this. All right, Snickers opponent. Let's go to combat. My Snickers opponent says, yeah, sure, whatever. I'm going to exhaust my Rao Dragon Tamer, and I'm going to target one of his towers. And then he says, ha, 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 I'm going to exhaust my Guardian Knight and intercept your attack. And because my Guardian has 2,000 power and your guy has 1,500, your guy's dead. And then I will say, not quite, Snickers boy. Let's exhaust one shard to pay the cost of this insta-cast spell. And then I will cast Imbued by Fire. Boom. My opponent now has a chance to respond to this. And if he has something else he can do that's sneaky, then he could do that before this takes effect. We'll talk about that later, but he has a chance to respond. Let's say he doesn't. Now my fire unit, this goes into play. Target fire unit gets plus 2,000. Boom, I'm going to target Rao Dragon Tamer. He gets plus 2,000. He's now at 3,500. The spell goes into the discard zone because it was played. Now my 3,500 kills his 2,000 power knight. His knight dies, and that was very satisfying. Thus ends another combat phase. Once combat ends, you fart back into the main phase and you continue. So now we're in the main phase. What can we do? We have 3 shards left. We should definitely play something. Oh my goodness, look, we've got another Rao Dragon Tamer. Let's play that. So I'm going to exhaust 3 shards. and I'm going to play this Rao Dragon Tamer, which, because I have a small playmat, is starting to crowd my other cards, but that's fine. When the Dragon Tamer comes into play, I get to switch target exhausted dragon unit to active. So I'm going to reactivate my booster dragon again, and then because I'm a jerk-face McGee, I'm going to attack my opponent. Whoop whoop. So let's go ahead and move to combat. Right now, Snickers Boy is like not even paying attention anymore, so I go ahead and move to combat, and then I target his tower. He no longer has a Night Guardian, so he can't block me. And let's crack this one. Now remember, these are my opponent's towers. They're actually over there. And it's the Tower of Air. The Tower of Air has a very powerful ability when it's destroyed. When this card is destroyed, you can return up to 2 units from the field to their owner's hand. So because this is my opponent's tower, and now gets cracked, he's going to pick, I don't know, 2 units, I guess. Maybe this one, and just bounce them back into my hand, which again helps balance the game. Anyway, there's the basics of moving in and out of combat. You've now seen several iterations of draw, charge, main phase, right? Just remember to draw first, remember to charge, and after you ready all of your stuff, don't forget to draw a new shard every turn. That's your guaranteed resource draw, right? And then now you've seen kind of how towers help balance the game, and we've talked about unit fields, and we've talked about exhausting and then moving back to active, right? Exhausting and readying your stuff. So I think you get the idea there. Let's go ahead and let's start talking about some of the finer points of the game, like win conditions. Okay, so how do you win this game now that you're playing back and forth? The way you win Argent Saga is you have to destroy all 5 towers. And then once all 5 towers are destroyed, you have to make one final attack with a unit, right, that deals damage to your opponent, and then you win. If you attack and you don't deal damage, then you don't win, right? If they find a way to stop the attack, it has to be a successful attack that deals damage. And that's how you win. The other way to win the game right now is you can win if your opponent runs out of cards. So if you ever go to draw a card, if you are required to draw a card and you can't because you ain't got none left, then you lose. So you can win by milling out your opponent. You can win by dealing damage after all the towers are destroyed. And then there is an alternate win condition that was released in the 3rd booster set Ascension, where you have this Magimaze card, and if you build up enough counters on it, or if you get rid of all the counters, you win the game. But we won't talk about that today. Suffice to say, for intro's sake, destroy the towers, hit your opponent, and that's how you win. And that, Future Shard Ninjas, that's all I got. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed part 2 of How to Play Argent Saga. Stay tuned for part 3. We're going to talk about game mechanics and deck building, stuff like that, some of the finer details of play for those who are interested. And then we'll do some actual gameplay later on down the road. But for now, peace out, Future Shard Ninjas. Argos out.